Sonnet 130 Analysis by Malia Dolan, Elisha Orozco, and Derek Martinez.
William Shakespeare was born in April 1564 and died in 1616, during the Elizabethan era. He is regarded as one of the greatest writers of all time. Shakespeare did not attend a university and was schooled until the age of 14.
In 1609, Shakespeare published a series of 154 sonnets. Sonnets 127 to 154 are all about the Dark Lady, who is presumably his lover. The sonnet style is English/Shakespearean, and when Shakespeare wrote this sonnet, his society had an obsession with the Petrarch style of love poems. And these poems exaggerated a woman's physical beauty through comparisons. This poem is Shakespeare's satirical response to the poems he saw and disapproved of.
My mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun. Coral is far more red than her lips red. If snow be white, why then her breasts are dun. If hairs be wires, black wires grow on her head. I have seen roses damasked, red and white, but no such roses see I in her cheeks. And in some perfumes is there more delight than in her breath that from my mistress reeks. I love to hear her speak, yet well I know that music hath a more pleasing sound. I grant I never saw goddess go. My mistress, when she walks, treads on the ground. And yet, by heaven, I think my love as rare as any she belied with false compare.
My mistress does not have bright eyes, red lips, white skin, or soft hair. Her cheeks are not rosy, and her breath does not smell of perfume. Her voice is not as lovely as music, and she does not walk like a goddess. But she is just as special as other women who have been misrepresented by false comparisons.
In contrasting his mistress to beauty standards, Shakespeare criticizes Petrarchan poetry and the way it belittles women to their appearance.
In the first quatrain, Shakespeare creates a twist on Petrarchan poetry's diction in order to mock it. Love poems often compare women's physical attributes to beautiful things in order to overstate and flatter her. However, Shakespeare defies this when he says, "My mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun." Instead of completing this metaphor and overstating the beauty of her eyes the way a Petrarchan poem would, he opts for honesty. This creates a surprising twist in the trajectory of his poem, which intends to hook the audience with something new compared to the cliched flattery prevalent in love poems. He continues to bluntly assess her lips, breast, and hair, discussing the latter most with, "If hairs be wires, black wires grow on her head." His use of imagery forms an unappealing picture of brittle, dark hair, which contrasts with the poetic description of women's hair as golden thread. This unnerving and unattractive description of her hair is hyperbolized in the opposing direction of love poetry, since instead of complimenting her, he appears to insult her. In the second quatrain, Shakespeare emphasizes the ways in which his mistress does not meet beauty standards outlined in the romanticized poems. His joke at the expense of other poets continues its construction with more allusions, such as when he admits, "I have seen roses damasked, red and white, but no roses see I in her cheeks." Again, he sets up expectations for what he should say, just to counter them. Furthermore, his twist reveals that he disapproves of poems which describe parts of a woman's appearance, because it belittles her into her features rather than seeing her as a whole person. In this quatrain, Shakespeare goes into further detail of what his mistress lacks, depicting the negatives in her rather than preserve an unrealistic view of women. Shakespeare is not blinded by the cultural norms of what is expected to be portrayed in a poem. Rather, he challenges the stereotypes placed on women.
In the third quatrain, Shakespeare begins to assess his mistress as a human instead of an object to be observed, revealing his fondness for her, which has nothing to do with appearance. Rather than talk about her appearance in this quatrain, he transitions to discuss her voice and her mannerisms. His tone appears changed from the first two quatrains, because finally his mistress is described not just as an image, but as a walking, talking person. Certainly her voice falls short when compared to music, but he admits that he loves to hear her speak, which shows that he may value the nature of their conversations more than the sound of her voice. Whereas other poets may exaggerate and overstate the beauty of her voice. Shakespeare once again refrains, continuing his honest evaluation of his mistress. He also says, "I grant I never saw a goddess go. My mistress, when she walks, treads on the ground." This further builds the idea of his mistress as a human and not something unrealistic and not an image to be praised. He has never seen a goddess go because the images of the woman that poetry creates appear static and superficial, highlighting the view of real women. In stating that his mistress treads on the ground, Shakespeare depicts her as a dynamic character, not a praised image, but someone alive and real. Something realistic that is comparable. She may fall short of the goddess that society expects and wants her to be, but such standards and expectations rarely exist outside of the literature, an idea that Shakespeare wishes to highlight through this metaphor.
In the couplet, Shakespeare concludes his disparagement of Petrarchan society and asserts his mistress's uniqueness, which goes beyond superficiality. After the unappealing comments he has made about his mistress, Shakespeare discards his mocking tone and declares, "I think my love as rare as any she belied with false compare." With this simile, his message takes a serious turn and implies that even though he refuses to flatter his mistress with falsehoods, she is still as special as any other woman. This disses other poets because he reveals their comparisons between women and beautiful things as the hyperboles that they are. While other poets lie and misrepresent women in an effort to compliment them, his poem is truthful and refuses to belittle them into their appearance. This creates a poem with a genuine quality which most Petrarchan poems lacked at the time. In conclusion, when poems overstate a woman's beauty, they destroy any sincerity that they might have intended. Not only that, they also create unrealistic standards for women and objectify them based on their appearance. Shakespeare's sonnet, on the other hand, trades compliments for truth when discussing his mistress. This gives his poem a genuine feel to it because he sees more in her than the outside and refuses to lie just because everyone else is doing it. Therefore, in Sonnet 130, Shakespeare wittily reshapes what a love poem should look like, while also critiquing society's focus on the superficial.
Thank you.